Welcome to another episode of Friends of Bhutan, a series where we celebrate individuals from around the world who have cultivated deep and meaningful connections with our country. Today we are honored to introduce a guest whose profound love for Bhutanese art, culture and spirituality has touched both hearts and institutions. Dr. Ariana Maki. A scholar, educator and cultural advocate, Dr. Maki has spent many years working hand in hand with Bhutanese communities and institutions to preserve and promote the kingdom's rich spiritual and artistic heritage. Her expertise in Buddhist art and iconography has not only deepened global academic understanding, but also supported Bhutan's own efforts in safeguarding its cultural legacy. Join us as we explore her remarkable journey, the inspirations behind her work, and the enduring friendship she shares with Bhutan. Dr. Ariana Maki, welcome to the show.
So I'm going to ask you the first question. So what drew you to Bhutan? I'm interested in when your first journey to our country was, if you could tell us a bit more about that.
Oh my goodness. Well, my first journey was in my mind and my heart because I saw a picture of Tatsang and like for so many people was immediately drawn into, I want to go to that place. I'd been studying Tibetan art already for a few years, and then when I saw this picture of Tatsang, I thought, okay, I'm going to go see what's there. And it took me another few years to save up enough money to be able to come. I came as a tourist with my late auntie. We did a very typical 2-week tour out to Bhutan. We were enthralled and excited. And then my auntie left to go back home to the US. And I stayed and paid the SDF, which at the time was $160 per day. And I wanted to read Pecha in the National Library. Wow. And after a number of days of that, somebody walked up to me and said, "Excuse me, madam, what are you doing?" I think it was not maybe the typical experience they have of guests in the library who look like me. And it ended up becoming one of my closest collaborators, Dr. Yunten Darge, who is now the director of the National Library. So that chance encounter has led to a long-standing and fruitful research collaboration.
Wonderful. And I think, how many years ago was this?
Oh my goodness. Well, I'm afraid to say, but it was 18 years ago, believe it or not.
Oh wow. That's so you must be seeing a lot of changes, and I'm also curious to know what were your first impressions of Bhutan back then.
Well, I think like so many who come from outside, our first impression is thanks to Druk Air. It was, seeing the wings passing by village houses was a thrilling experience. And then the next most sensory impact that I had was eating ize for the first time, which I love spicy food. So I knew that part of me was feeling quite at home. And I think if I were to point to one moment that really encapsulated the excitement I felt about being in Bhutan was out in Bumthang at Jampe Lakhang. I arrived there at the same time as some nuns who had walked all the way from Punakha. And so they came and they were seated in front of the Jowo Jampa and they were chanting a text. And as I sat there, I was completely enthralled, and the kunyar was so nice, the resident lam. He said, you can sit if you wish. And so I just sat and listened, not in a meditative state, but more of an absorptive state. I was thinking as I'm sitting on the ground, how many feet have walked on this wood, and then you smell that smell inside the temple of incense and butter lamp, where it's just almost, it's part of the wall, it's part of the air, and looking up at the Jowo Jampa and having the people, these beautiful nuns chanting so wonderfully. I mean, their pronunciation was gorgeous, and so for me, that's just a really resonant, multi-sensory experience that still sits with me all these years later.
You described it so beautifully, and it's something I resonate with. I think when you go to these ancient places full of history, I like, I'm sure you do this, I like touching the walls as well, or the floor, and some places actually have imprints, right?
Exactly, of just like feeling the coolness of the wall. Of course, we don't touch the murals, right? We touch outside the painted surfaces, but when those footprints are there, just the slickness of the wood, the size of the planks themselves, just noticing all of these things really can bring history to life, and then make us feel like we are part of that place also.
True. But I'm also curious because hearing you talk so much with so much passion and knowledge as well, because I know you've studied a lot about the Himalayan arts and Tibetan arts. What drew you to that first? Was it from a very early age, or I wanted to know what made Ariana Maki, now Dr. Ariana Maki, interested in this field? If you could share with our viewers.
Honestly, my first experiences came about because my mother brought me to her art history classes with her. So I was only about 8 or 9 years old, and she brought me to her university courses as she was earning her master's in landscape architecture. So I would be in these classes about French Gothic architecture, and that's the one that really stuck with me. I first thought when I chose the art history major that I was going to be a European architecture historian, and we had to take some classes that were non-Western in focus, which is I don't like the term non-Western because it centers the West, but that's what it was called. And I took a class called Introduction to Buddhist Iconography, and I was absolutely hooked. I was going to the library reading Lokesh Chandra's iconography series of books that I think it's something like 24 volumes. And so like one entire volume is almost all Yeshigum. Another one is almost all Chenrezi. And so I just was absorbing as much as I could, and I found happily that it stuck with me in a way that has been able to facilitate a career of encouraging others to find those other details and the deities that resonate with them when they're looking in these temple environments.
Oh wow. I think that must take a lot of time as well to go through all this, because we have so many I don't know, I always wonder, as a Buddhist, do we call them gods and goddesses, or do we call them deities, or celestial beings? When you talk about all the different, I guess it's okay to call them gods and goddesses, right, La?
I think so. And I think if we wanted to add more granular approach to it, we could they can be sort of broken up into function. Right. You know, there are the protective deities, and then there are the meditative deities like Yidam, and then there are those that are more like intercessors or benefactors like Droljang, right? And then if we are unwell, there are others that we go to. So we can get extremely detailed, but I think broadly saying gods, goddesses, Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, all of it is welcome. I think the more we talk about them, the better.
From your extensive research, I know it might not be, I understand it might not be easy to quantify, but is there a number of the amount of iconography in Buddhist art?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I don't know if I can quantify that. What I've been especially thrilled by, though, is how different Buddhist traditions the masters will experience, and even within the same tradition, the masters will experience these deities or these gods in different ways. So Atisha saw Chenrezi with 11 heads as sitting down, where Gelongma Palmo saw him standing up and he healed her leprosy. So there's so much individuation according to how these great masters have experienced and continue to experience these deities that I'm actually happy that we can't put a number to them, because it means that the experiences are continuing to grow.
Okay, well, that's again so wonderfully put. So getting back to Bhutan, because our show is about celebrating friends like you. When you hear the word Bhutan now, what does Bhutan mean to you personally beyond your academic work? Because I know you've made very good friends and I'm sure very good associates here. So can you tell us a bit more?
Yes, I think it's hard to separate out the academic from me, because I just love teaching so much. It brings me a lot of joy and a lot of excitement, and just like you said, has been the fuel for so many meaningful connections. But if I had to completely strip all of that away, I think what Bhutan means for me now at this point in my life is it's been a location of incredible personal growth. And I don't mean that in sort of the Orientalist, I went to Asia and discovered myself. Yeah, exactly. I did not eat, pray, love. I have eaten a lot and I have prayed a lot, and I love the people that I've met. But the thing that if I'm being fully transparent, when I first came, I was a young graduate student. I had this very fixed idea, almost a type A personality about how things had to happen. And because of my time here, I was able to get rid of a lot of that. I was able to cast that away, become much more flexible, much more open to things just emerging. Because sometimes someone would say, oh, there's this ritual going on, would you like to come? Whereas before, I would not have opened myself up to that opportunity because I didn't know what it would entail. Now, because of my time in Bhutan, I've been able to get rid of that which doesn't serve me well, and I've had so many wonderful experiences as a result, but mostly as a result of Bhutanese hospitality and kindness.
I'd also like to half joke that I think you've also experienced what we call BST, which is the Bhutan stretchable time. That'll make anyone, you're forced to sort of just surrender to.
Exactly. This person is out of station, you need their signature, and it might be 2 weeks.
Or 2 months.
Or 2 months.
Well, that's so nice to hear. So I guess this is a segue to my next question, which I think you've already sort of answered in the previous one, which is how has your time in Bhutan changed you as a scholar, a human being, and this sounds very the it word, but as a global citizen as well.
Yeah, well, as I think, improving my ability to become flexible was a huge personal shift, and that's brought me incredible happiness. In terms of being a scholar, it has humbled me to get to know the depth and breadth of knowledge of Bhutanese experts. And I'm not just talking about the scholars who are incredible people, but also everyday persons who know their community history, their temple's history, people who have walked with me on Nakor and they narrate all the sacred spaces. They talk to me about the different ne, the different things we are passing by. So in that regard, it's almost, I'm not the scholar, but I'm more the student, and that people here have been so generous to share with me their knowledge and their histories. In terms of global citizen, oh my gosh, Bhutan reminds me all the time. I've been fortunate enough to come here many, many times, including some long-term stays. And still, every week, multiple times a week, I'm stunned, excited by, curious about things that I'm experiencing.
I think you've been to many, many more interesting places than I think some of us have ever been to. I think this episode is not long enough to cover so many things, so many aspects. I know that you've traveled to many parts of the Himalayas. I wanted to know, is there a difference between the Buddhist art that you've studied or you've observed in Bhutan, if you compare that, let's say, with Nepal or Sikkim or Tibet? Is there anything that's distinct?
Yes, absolutely. And I love this question because so many times I see in print and I hear people speak about our unique Bhutanese art, and that excites me because there are unique qualities about it. When we look with informed eyes at an image, a painting or a sculpture, we can see that Bhutan as a nation now has often been part of a really rich and dynamic interchange between these different regional cultures. And so if we look carefully, we can see, oh, this comes from 5th century India, this came from 11th century India, here's something from Kashmir, here's something from Tibet, here's something from Nepal. And so at the same time that Bhutanese art reflects this really rich interconnected history, we can also look with careful eyes and say, here is something that is purely Bhutanese, that is only done here. And this is a masterpiece of Bhutanese art and workmanship.
Could you please give me an example of something that's uniquely Bhutanese?
Yes. So something I really appreciate is many times we can watch the master's age. So for example, 4th Druk Desi Tenzin Rabge, if you look, some images of him, he has very dark hair, he's in the prime of his youth as he has assumed the Desi-ship, and then as time goes on, he gets a little salt and pepper, a little snow on the mountain, and his goatee even gets a little gray. And so then towards the end of his life, he's shown as a fully adult senior citizen. And that's something that we don't see always in other parts of the Himalaya. As well, there's a tradition, the outermost robe of the master, whether it's guru or another human master who's sitting down, there's a volume to that robe where it almost defies gravity, like they have a really good dry cleaner or something that's making the outer garment really puff up. And often, but not always, there will be 2 kada, one on each, close to each knee, tied in a bow. Nobody else does that. Tibetans don't do it, Nepalese don't do it, Sikkimese don't do it. It's purely Bhutanese. And then even the style of certain pigments, you can tell when the workmanship is coming from a Bhutanese hand.
That's really insightful. I've heard from the elder members of my family that Bhutanese have always been renowned for their clay statues, clay making, jinzo. Is that true, La?
It is absolutely true, and I'm so glad you brought it up because it's not just knowledge within Bhutan but outside Bhutan. So I was in Kathmandu last week and gave a paper and was speaking with people afterwards, and many of them were from the Newar community, and so they're famous for metalwork. Right? Unsurpassed metalwork, but even they said directly, the clay work in Bhutan, the jinzos from Bhutan, those are the ones who do the best clay. And so part of what we're working on is finding the connections, finding historical records where these artists are being commissioned and brought back and forth to these different places. In Bhutan specifically, a wonderful place for the clay making tradition was Heifu or Nefu in Paro. They have generations of Heifutuku, Nefutuku that were sculptors themselves, as well as members of the surrounding community, and that may well be connected to Tsankhenchen Palden Jamtso, who taught and trained a lot of artists in that region from one of his densa at Menchuna, which is just behind Nefu Gompa.
Okay, Dr. Ariana, because I've always been fascinated with really these old sort of, when we visit a temple, we have these debris, right, La? So from your research and your travels within Bhutan, where can we find some of the oldest Buddhist art in Bhutan?
Mm-hmm. I think some of the oldest sculptures that you'll be able to see easily are the ones at Kichu and at Jampe Lakang. There are other temples that are supposedly as old as those or close to it, such as at Jangsa in Paro, right across from Dungse Lakang. Some say that the white and black, the Lakarpang Hangak in Ha, also have some age to it. And if we go up a little bit past Taktsang and to go to Heidi Gompa, you can see some very, very early sculptures there.
How early are we talking about?
Oh, for example, for Heidi or Hlading Gompa, that temple was probably founded around 13th, 14th century, and some of the wood carving that's there very clearly reflects that dating.
So the next question that I have is, what role do you think visual culture plays in Bhutan's national identity and spiritual life?
That's a big question, and I can only answer it as an outsider from my outside perspective. The ways that I see visual culture and material culture, so paintings and sculptures impacting the spiritual life of Bhutanese is, the action of viewing a tongdro, getting together as a community and looking at these massive, beautifully created works of art can engender a sense of belonging and a sense of community, as well as a sense of reverence and awe, which can help to inspire some people to maybe make changes in their personal lives or behavior or the way that they are in their communities that will make their lives more fulfilling and make the communities more flourish more. Also in the generation of the creation or commissioning of works of art for specific reasons. If somebody is unwell, if somebody is about to travel somewhere, if a baby is on the way, all of these reasons that material culture, what I call art, but is actually life, right? It's the spiritual life of Bhutan. It just happens from a disciplinary perspective. I call it art. But I think that's not always the most useful category, because when we're talking about visual culture, it's not just painting, sculpture, debris, ritual objects. It's this moment. It's how we're holding our bodies. It's the garments that we wear. It's the way we treat each other on the street. And so in that way, I see values that come from a Buddhist heritage in almost every interaction I have.
Mm-hmm. And would you also agree that because Bhutan, we have oral culture, our stories, our traditions were all passed down orally. I suppose the visual aids or these Buddhist art also helped preserve that part of our culture, which was not written, right? What are your thoughts on that?
I agree, absolutely right. One of the ways that I explain works of art, especially like sakli, like when they're showing the initiation cards or a mandala, I say these are flashcards. Yes. Essentially, these are tutorials that the masters have provided to us, that Lhadrips and other creators have provided to us, so that if we get the initiation and the permission to do a certain practice, we can't necessarily just sit down and start. We need to have these visual cues to help us, to remind us, because our own minds can be so distracted, and we can say, oh, did he say this is in the left hand or that is in the right hand? But then if a person really fulfills their practice and continues to take it on a rigorous basis, then those supports no longer become necessary. The visual aids don't become as necessary, and then the sound of the teaching, the act of the practice can remove the need for the physical object.
Mm-hmm. That's fascinating again. Dr. Ariana, you've worked on projects like the Bhutan Cultural Library. How do you see digital tools, especially now in 2025, helping Bhutan protect and share our heritage with the rest of the world? Mm-hmm. In fact, just recently, GovTech, I think, GovTech launched something with the Ministry of Home and Cultural Affairs. The NFTs, the Buddhist art NFTs was recently launched. So this is another interesting realm we're going to, where we're talking about digitalizing. So what are your thoughts on this?
Absolutely. The role of the digital world, it's pervasive and almost unavoidable. Yes. And it can create challenges for culture, but it can also do some very important functions. So from my perspective, digitization is critical for a number of reasons. First, in case there is a fire or an earthquake disaster like they unfortunately have happened here, having a complete visual record, how big something was, what was placed where, can help to reconstruct anything that happens to be lost due to natural disaster. Secondly, say something gets lost or stolen. In order to make an international police report, to make claims for repatriation, having a clear digital record saying this was in this temple at this time, here's exactly what it looks like, is critical and crucial. And I'm not saying that those records need to necessarily be made publicly available, because we don't want them to act as a shopping list, but having those records stored internally is really, really important. From an outside perspective, providing digital resources, third, for an audience outside, enables those who are not fortunate like me to be able to come to Bhutan several times, or maybe even once, to be able to look at things that might be meaningful for their research or even for their own personal practice. Mm-hmm. They might not be able to come here and be able to meet some of the tukus and rinpoches and khenpos who are here, and so that offers another avenue to understand. Mm-hmm. And fourth, from a research perspective, it provides comparative data so that people want to say, what is Bhutanese about the Bhutan's way of doing this? There's a record right there. Some of the songs that Lodin Foundation produced, some of the stories, the accounts of sacred places, provide an incredible rich library that's free and open access for everyone. And finally, I find that this the last reason that I think digitization can be critical is that it can open a doorway for younger people who are more digitally oriented, who are having more of their lives online, to hopefully see something about their culture, about Bhutanese culture, and open up a conversation with their parents, their grandparents, their aunties, their uncles, the kunyar at a temple. Seeing something and wanting to know more about it can bring those dialogues into the real world.
Yes. In fact, at the recently renovated and revamped Wangdipodong Palace, isn't that a part of their museum curation as well?
Yes, there are some digital elements there. I had the privilege of going through just a few weeks ago, and they made this gorgeous digital table that tells the stories not just of local history in Bhutan, but also of Bhutanese history. I mean, I think I played with that for about 20 minutes, even though I think it might be geared for a younger learner.
I have yet to visit, but it's definitely a place I'd love to go. I think a lot of good work has been put into it.
Incredible work. It's
Yes.
a beautiful place.
Yes. Dr. Ariana, I wanted to ask you, how many dzongkhaks have you visited?
So far, I've visited only 12. I'm very keen to get back out to the east. For example, I've never been to Hunsi, and there are so many ne, so many lakang there that that's my wish list for the next trip.
I've been to Hunsi, but years ago, and you're right, there are many wonderful small hagangs. You know, back in the day, this is like 50 years ago, we didn't have smartphones, so and I used to have these small digital cameras, but unfortunately it's either misplaced or the pixels were very small, so I used to have photos, but now I don't. But I remember really interesting paintings in Khoma. That's in
Yes,
Hunsi,
I've
right?
heard about this, yes.
Really, I mean, I'm not an expert, but I found it very unique because in one of the lagangs, I wish I remembered which one, the murals, is that how you pronounce that? They had people wearing different clothing. They almost look like salwar kameezes.
Yes.
I would, maybe it's a time to go back and ask the history behind it, but yeah.
Well, first off, let's go. Let's go together.
We'll go together right after this.
And secondly, I love that point because when we look at the details, we can really find out a lot. When you mentioned that story, what jumped into my mind was a mural at Tamjing. Upstairs, there's a Longchenpa. So there's Sepakme is in the main lakang, and then there's a Longchen mural right outside, and he's sitting there in the position we expect for Longchen with both his hands down, and the images of the jinda, the images of the people giving offerings at the bottom, it's gorgeous. The textiles are beautiful. You can tell these people are coming from Mongolia, these people are coming from India, these people are coming from all around the Buddhist world to celebrate and make offerings to a master. So paying attention like you did is some of the ways that we can really find out something more about our own history.
Right.
Our art history, I should say.
And that was the way they preserved that moment in time as well. No photographs back in the day.
Exactly.
So 12 dzongkhaks, some you've been more than others. Hunsi yet on the cards, but very soon with us.
Yes.
We're going together with me.
Yes.
So what's a Bhutanese piece of art or a site or a ritual that personally moved you and why?
So if I were forced to choose one, I think it would have to be the Memorial Choten, simply because it is art, it is site, it is ritual, it is history. It was made for the most beautiful of reasons, the commemoration of His Majesty the Third King and his incredible contributions to Bhutanese history. And when we go inside, it is a full description from the perspective of Dudjom Rinpoche and the teachings that both protect and perpetuate Bhutanese well-being. Every deity in there has a lesson to teach us, and it's absolutely sublime. The workmanship is beautiful. And then in terms of the ritual life, we see so much around it. We see, the retired folks are spinning the prayer wheels. We see the circumambulation. We see the prostration. We do it ourselves. And even there are acts of generosity happening there all the time. In the winter, when I was doing a little bit of Kora, and somebody just handed me a little plastic cup full of porridge. And so it's community building, it's devotional, it's providing us a template to potentially reach more levels of wisdom within ourselves if we look at what's being provided to us through the imagery. And it's just a stunning, stunning place.
Wonderful. And the symmetry is beautiful as well.
Yes.
I would have never guessed that you would pick the Memorial Choten, but and the justification is so beautifully put. So thank you for that. This is another question where I think your view as somebody who is not a stranger to Bhutan, but also someone who comes from outside of Bhutan. So I think your thoughts would be great on this question. So as Bhutan opens up even more now to the outside world, what do you feel are the opportunities and challenges for preserving our cultural integrity, identity?
Yes, I appreciate being asked this question, and again, I'm just coming from an outside perspective. Something that I could see as potentially being a challenge is if culture becomes performative. If we are too busy thinking about our phones and where we want to work and things like that, then we might not be transmitting information to one another. And if culture becomes a commodity, what does that mean for a sense of national identity or cultural meaning? But that also leads directly into an opportunity, because something that has been done so well is that there are resources to learn and become culturally fluent. So from my perspective, having a very strong humanities education, not just in higher education in the university system, but also exposing younger learners to it. People in the K through 12 or primary to higher secondary level, having these cultural explanations, expositions, experiences, ways to think about culture, not just in a I do this physical movement, but I do this because, we do this because. And so I think as long as humanities and understanding cultural fluency, visual literacy continue to be such a strong part of Bhutan's broader culture, I think that the outlook is quite good.
Has there been any encounter in Bhutan, perhaps in a monastery or with a student or with anyone who you've encountered during your research that has left a lasting impression? Any memorable moment?
Oh my gosh, so many. There were, I think if I could distill it down into one general story, something that excites me is I notice that when I go into a temple, whether it's with friends or students or trainees, when we go in and we turn on our flashlights and we open up our notebooks and we start looking carefully, so often the kunyer or the resident lam will notice our interest, and all of a sudden it's a whole other different visit. All of a sudden nangten will appear, like cabinets get unlocked and stories get told, and I find that it's not just, oh, it's because it's a foreigner. Like, I actually notice myself stepping back, because then the conversation becomes between the caretaker and the Bhutanese who are there. So I'm listening and learning alongside them. And so I feel like each time we go in with an open and curious mind, when we have the time to do that, then it's going to be, and it's not just a lasting impression, because it's an enduring impression. It happens all the time, again and again, and it's just so welcoming and so wonderful.
Okay, I like that. I think that's really nice, and it's so true. I think even for the caretaker of the lagangs, they like it when people are genuinely interested, and I feel like maybe this should be a curriculum in our schools as well, especially for our younger generation. Which brings me to my next question, which is, what gives you hope about Bhutan's future, especially among the younger generation whom you interact with as well, right? Especially now with our young generation, they grew up with the internet, something that my generation didn't grow up with. And they can really see the rest of the world with just a press of their smartphone. And I think now more than ever, I like what you said about how there's a danger and maybe a fine line between performative culture and then culture, like the authentic culture as well. So for me, one of the concerns that I have as someone in my generation is I hope we're not losing that essence as we progress or modernize, and with the internet, and how I keep talking about how young kids nowadays, little children, they know so much about the American culture, because that's the most pervasive right now on YouTube or on TV.
And they speak with American accents.
They
which
do.
Is a big change in the last several years.
Well, Peppa Pig is coming back because she just had a little sister, so there's going to be more episodes. We do have children with British accents as well, but the American accent, yes, definitely. So yes, long question, Doctor, but what are your thoughts about how Bhutan's future, especially with the younger generation in terms of culture? What are some of your observations?
Yeah, and I have to preface this with, to me, there's more than one younger generation. Where I am at my life stage now, I view younger generation as anyone who's 30 and under. And so that's a couple generations within that. So there are people who have finished maybe their secondary studies, their higher secondary school, and maybe they've gone a university route, maybe they've gone directly into the workforce, and they're starting families now. I view them as a younger generation to me, and I feel like there is room for them to act as interlocutors, because like you who are in that generation, you know what it was like before our worlds were here and our worlds were here and our posture was like this, and so there's this space where those who are not the youngest of the young can help bring the youngest along. And what excites me in particular about the youngest of the young, who I'll say are currently in secondary school or younger, is that there is a willingness to question, a willingness to engage, and an interest in responding. So for example, I just spoke at the Royal Academy. I was invited there to bring some of the classes through one of the 8 different lakhang that they have on campus. So we went to a few different lakhang, each class went to different ones, and afterwards the questions were amazing. An hour of questions, sometimes an hour and a half of questions, and even afterwards, such wonderful students. And even afterwards, 3 of them came up to me and said, "I've never heard of art history before. This is really exciting." And so I gave them my personal email and I said, "Let's keep in touch," And so that openness, and I also encounter it here, just on the street, people asking me, young kids, "What are you doing here? Why are you here?" And I said, "Oh, I'm interested in paintings and tanka," and they want to know, why I'm interested in it, but what interests me about it. And so I feel like in previous generations, that type of, open questioning was less common. I didn't see that when I was, here in the early days. And now seeing that amongst so many young people gets me really excited, because I think that they're expanding their minds in different ways.
Okay, that's very encouraging to hear, and very good observation as well. You're right. I think before maybe we were known to be very shy as well, and it's nice to know that they're very inquisitive now.
So as I mentioned, Loden Foundation has made a number of really important resources available online, open access. Anybody can use them, download them, enjoy them. They're for free use. And it's also very exciting. You mentioned recent initiatives. The Jun Dratsang Antiquities Preservation Center is also doing a digitization project where it's skills building and capacity building for monks and nuns so that they can go into the different districts and do a really thorough documentation of those lakhang that are held under the Jung Dratsang.
Okay, wonderful. I think I hope students will also look into these resources.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We've come to the last question we have for this episode. Dr. Ariana Maki, how does it feel to be considered a good friend of Bhutan?
Oh, Tsedon, it's humbling, it's an honor. Thank you so much. And if Bhutan feels I am a friend, then that is a huge source of joy to me. Thank you.
So we look forward to all the amazing work that you're carrying out, and I think through this episode, I hope that it inspires our viewers of all ages to delve into our Buddhist iconography, Bhutanese art, and also look for very interesting things that they can see in murals, in debris, in tankas. I'm going to look out for the the voluminous ropes, as well as the khadas and bows, and also the jindas of each family, how they offered offerings to the lams as well as the guests. I think these are fascinating insights when we didn't have photographs. So thank you so much for your time, La, and we wish you all the best, and we hope to see you again.
Thank you so much, Sirama.
Thank you, La.